When it comes to video games, the worst thing you can do is release something that's forgettable. A good game, well, sure, that's the intent, but if it goes horribly wrong, sometimes you'll catch a saving grace and the attention of the masses by producing something that's so bad people want to play it regardless. Morbid curiosity is definitely a thing after all, and if your bad video game has a unique selling point, then bully for you, you may have just made history. Not as you intended, but it's notoriety all the same. Most of the titles on this list are never going to be anyone's favourite, but they're at least worth that look of morbid curiosity. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 terrible video games you should play anyway. Number 10. Shadow the Hedgehog. In 2005, Sega decided to cash in on the popularity of Sonic's broody bro Shadow the Edgelord and give him his own spin-off. How would they separate it from any other Sonic game? Well, why not slap a gun into his hands and see what happens? I'm sure we can all agree that that idea was staring us in the face this whole time. Shadow the Hedgehog isn't the most broken of the Sonic games, that's for sure, but it definitely broke any semblance of sanity the series had at that point. Shadow spends his one and only titular release firing a variety of firearms, driving in tanks and cursing like an angsty teen. This one is worth playing for a couple of reasons. First of all, the game has a really cool system of morality-based objectives you can pick from on the fly in each stage. It plots out a course through the game's many stages based on these choices, meaning there are a lot of different possible playthroughs, and that's genuinely impressive. Mostly though, you need to play Shadow the Hedgehog just to understand how absolutely nuts it is. If you can make it through the opening cutscene with Shadow sneering with an automatic rifle in his hands without laughing, well, you're made of sterner stuff than me. Number 9. Shakfu. Shakfu sort of cultivated its own legend around its lack of quality, even if it wasn't very mediocre. Being released following the home debuts of Super Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2, it never stood a chance. So hated was basketball star Shaq's foray into video games that a group of players decided to do something about it and made it their goal to spread the gospel of destroying as many physical copies of the game as possible. Shakfu has spent so long being included in every list of the worst games of all time that people seem to be groomed into instinctively shuddering when they hear the name. It may well be terrible, but it's not the black hole of creativity that the legend makes it sound. It has a consistent visual design and is decently well animated, so props for that, but admittedly that doesn't save it from being slow, shallow and absolutely paling in comparison to its peers. Regardless, it's now part of the great tapestry of gaming because of its extreme reaction, so in many ways it's worth taking a look at just for that alone. Plus, if you can get your hands on a copy, you can oppose the Destroy Shakfu regime and preserve this odd piece of gaming history. Number 8. South Park. South Park, at the height of its popularity, was a juggernaut for merchandising and tie-ins. As such, South Park needed to have a game out, and it needed to have it out fast. Using the Turok engine of all things, South Park's first video game outing was a straightforward first-person shooter that contained much of the series' character and potty-mouth sensibility. The reality of the situation is that since it was so rushed out into public hands, South Park is ugly and limited in its scope. Levels are monotonous, as is replaying the whole thing if you die due to a lack of checkpoints, and the game has a serious lack of music and voiceover variety. On top of this, the ghastly short draw distance to try and hide its blemishes made it unbelievably boring to look at. All that said, the South Park game is as inventive as the show, and its sense of humour definitely offers a few chuckles. Whilst the campaign is forgettable, South Park did ship with multiplayer, which allows players to concentrate most on what the game did best, which was its variety of silly weaponry, from toilet plunger firearms to the cow launcher. There is definitely still fun to be had in selecting your favourite foul-mouthed kid and embarrassing your friends by pelting them with yellow snowballs. Ah, youth. Number 7. Goat Simulator. This one is a little different in that the beauty of Goat Simulator is that, being a spoof of the growing sim genre, it was intentionally made a little badly. Developer Coffee Stain Studios had no qualms allowing physics glitches and such to get through the code to provide the kind of entertainment that we all get from watching a game world appear to fall apart. Nothing about Goat Simulator should be right. There's no story, no set objective, nothing of the sort. Its physics don't make sense, its presentation is a mess, and yet it was destined to go viral. On the great face of video gaming, with all of its glorious AAA successes, Goat Simulator is the cheeky pimple that cropped up overnight. Want to become the world's best skateboarding goat? Would you rather ingest sugar cubes and get psychedelic? Perhaps you're more into sneaking up on people and pushing them to their doom. All of these and so much more are at your fingertips in the game's ridiculous open world. It was never going to win any fancy schmancy awards, but Goat Simulator reminds us that all video games don't always have to be cinematic or high art. Sometimes it's just enough that they make us smile, and terrorizing a town as a demonic goat sounds like something that could make just about anyone smile. Number 6. Pepsi Man. The guys down at Pepsi headquarters back in 1999 must have had a very wonderful idealised view of things. With their mascot, superhero Pepsi Man, all crises can be averted. One such crisis is stopping a riot breaking out because of angry consumers upset about a late Pepsi delivery, even though, come to think of it, Pepsi Man's gameplay shows cans of the drink just lying around all over the roads in various real-life cities. Well, that seems like an accident waiting to happen. Pepsi Man is a cheap licensed product designed more to sell you fizzy drinks than to blow you away with its deep gameplay. As such, don't expect more than alternating level to level between running away and running towards the camera and trying your hardest to avoid obstacles that come out of absolutely nowhere. Also, don't think too hard about the fact that the citizens of this world have built an entire city called Pepsi City as a shrine to their beloved soft drink. The gameplay may be boring, but it's also ridiculous that it's pretty hard to hate. It's debatable whether Pepsi Man's live action cutscenes and strange portrayal of American culture is meant to be funny, but there's definitely laughs to be had at the lunacy of it all. Number 5. Resident Evil Gaiden. Did you know that at one stage Resident Evil was being ported to the Game Boy Color? That project didn't ever finish because the task at hand was too great for the hardware, but it didn't stop Capcom from wanting to drop their horror series into the hugely popular handheld gaming space. Resident Evil Gaiden is often pointed and laughed at from a distance, and perhaps quite rightfully so. It's a strange mix of top-down exploration and, of all things, a first-person timing-based battle system that's got more in common with the likes of Undertale than modern Resi. The music is tinny, the plot is nonsense, and the game has a god-awful save system that chooses for you when to save your progress. But it has this undeniable charm to it as well. The fixed camera Resident Evil formula of the time was never going to work on a Game Boy, so props to Studio M4 for coming up with a different approach. Better yet, it's one that surprisingly manages to retain some classic Resi staples in trying to run past enemies to conserve your limited ammo and backtracking to areas with your new key. That's about where the similarities to the core series end, but very few gaming franchises that are still going strong today have curios quite like Resident Evil Gaiden. Number 4. 50 Cent's Blood on the Sand. 50 Cent Bulletproof was an absolute travesty of an action title that not only did nothing we hadn't seen before, but it barely got the essentials correct either. So how exactly Mr. Curtis Jackson got a sequel is beyond belief. 50 Cent Blood on the Sand is again an almost completely generic affair that uses all the most popular tricks in gaming of the time: vehicular combat, a ton of guns, chest-high walls, and of course slow motion bullet time action. Its storyline was no less shallow than its gameplay either, essentially boiling down to "that bitch has got my money." Charming. The most offensive thing about Blood on the Sand, however, it's actually rather fun. It's pompous and stupid, but there is joy to be had in the ridiculousness of playing as 50 Cent slow-mo mowing down terrorists in the Middle East. These kinds of cover-based shooters were a dime a dozen for a long time, but only one of them allows you to activate Gangster Fire, team with a G unit, and listen to original music that 50 Cent had written just for the game. Oh, it did do one thing unique. You can get extra points from taunting your opponents with profanity after they die, and these can be traded in for new swear words. You know what? I take it all back. This is a surefire 10 out of 10. Number 3. Ark Survival Evolved. The survival genre is at its best when it can get its hooks into you and 100 hours fly by without you realising it. Who amongst us hasn't suddenly had the "oh, it's 3 AM" moment when we played Minecraft? Ark Survival Evolved takes the relatively calming and straightforward nature of Minecraft and throws it out to sea. Its realistic demands and deep mechanics require gamers to play carefully and plan ahead as they attempt to survive a world that is currently populated by over 150 different, largely dangerous and often prehistoric creatures. Ark is not an easy game to get into. It doesn't embrace new players from a gameplay perspective, nor the fact that the game is absolutely busted. All the classics are here: unreliable AI pathfinding, awful collision detection, and horrendous lag. At this stage, the bugs are so deeply embedded into the game that most of them are never coming out. The reason you should play it? Well, Ark is a damn fine cooperative experience, whether you're fighting against the dinosaurs or the game itself. After all, misery breeds company, and while some of the bugs are frustrating, many weird occurrences offer unique gameplay experiences. Remember that time I climbed a saber-toothed tiger into the sky? Is not something you can say about many games. Number 2. Darkened Sky. Darkened Sky is about as average a game as you can get. A 2002 third-person adventure title that stars hero Sky exploring a fantastical setting looking to restore magic, light, and rainbows to her world. Its action is bland, its puzzles are horribly cryptic, and its platforming is painful. Still, it's got a very kooky sense of humour, lead characters often quip sarcastically between each other, and the fourth wall is broken so many times that it might as well not be there. Any other reason to play it? Well, with most video games that are licensed, like the aforementioned Pepsi Man, you know pretty much immediately, but Darkened Sky, the rogue that it is, doesn't have have the company logos emblazoned on the box, nor does it really hurry to reveal the truth that it is in fact a licensed product. In one of gaming's most surreal moments, Darkened Sky goes from a relatively blasé action-adventure into a total head-screw when Sky bends down to pick a Skittle up off the ground. Yes, a Skittle. The dark secret of Darkened Sky is the moment you realise that the magic system in the game is all based on brightly coloured candy. It doesn't make Darkened Sky any more an exciting gameplay experience, but I can't think of any other games where your spells are powered by sweets, so it's got that going for it. And number 1, Big Rigs over-the-road racing. If you can think of it, you can probably do it in Big Rigs, as long as it contains driving through every obstacle in the game unharmed, accelerating up totally vertical cliff faces without slowing down, and even sinking into the ground. For whatever reason, Game Mill appears to have decided that pre-alpha was good enough for this 2003 PC racing title and sent it out into the world to find its own way. What it found was anger, befuddlement, and the title of one of the worst games of all time. Still, many gamers were so stunned by the thing that they couldn't help but love it. Considering your one opponent doesn't leave the start line, it's hard to play Big Rigs as intended even when trying to ignore the glitches. Thus, the only fun to be had is driving through buildings, falling through bridges, and speeding over mountainsides. If there was ever a crown made for so bad it's good, then Big Rig deserves that, the throne and the scepter. You can't help but feel sorry for the thing rushed out of the door before it was done. Scared, confused, and ugly. I almost feel bad for calling it terrible, as what we have barely constitutes a game. Whatever you call it, you absolutely need to experience Big Rigs over the road racing at least once. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and any other video games that you can think of that count as terrible but are still worth playing for whatever reason. Make sure to like and share this video, subscribe to the channel for more, and hit the notification bell. I've been Si from WhatCulture, and have a good week.